with sarcoma, and he, you name it, Luke did it in terms of he's a sports fanatic, and diagnosed with sarcoma. He went through chemo, radiotherapy, and surgery. Fast forward, and he decided, as you do, as a can liver, as he likes to call himself, he decided to cycle 30,000 kilometers from Bristol to Beijing. It took 2.5 years, and without that being hard enough, he hit a COVID pandemic, and also had difficulties getting into China. So you may have met Luke along the way in Trafalgar Square or other places that he has continued to ride on his static tandem to finish those kilometers off. So he raised money for not just us, but for 3 other amazing charities: Move Charity, Young Lives versus Cancer, and Teenage Cancer Trust. He literally puts the can in cancer. He's really, really inspiring. He's really passionate about getting this message across, and we couldn't be more grateful to have him as our amazing host this evening. So Luke, tell us a little bit about your journey when you were diagnosed with sarcoma. You were incredibly passionate about physical activity in your life and your family, and it's kind of the ethos that you lived through. When you were diagnosed, did your oncology team talk to you about physical activity?
Yeah, so Jemima, when I was diagnosed with stage 4 sarcoma. It was a really, really bad diagnosis and prognosis. And I remember on the day that I was diagnosed, I said to my team, is there anything I can do? Because I'm in a really bad situation. Is there anything I can do to help myself? And I did a lot of running. I did triathlon, and I was like, exercise helps, doesn't it? And the healthcare team, they're like, well, you can exercise if you like, but it doesn't really make a difference too much either way. And I came away from this thinking, I know, how important exercise is. It makes me feel better. It makes my body stronger. And so, I basically ignored their advice, and I was like, I'm going to do as much exercise as I can, which ended up me taking my bike into hospital, cycling whilst on chemotherapy, not hard, but just sort of turning the pedals, and trying to be as active as I could through cancer. And I know that for me, that has made a huge difference in the outcome. And the fact that I'm still here today, I don't think anyone would have expected, and exercise is a huge part of that.
Thanks so much, Luke. And tell me, when you told your oncologist that you were doing this, what did he do?
Jemima, I'm not sure I told my lovely consultant. I think he came into my room in hospital one day and did a double take and thought he'd sort of stumbled on Anytime Fitness. And he saw this man in there cycling on his exercise bike, and he was like, oh my God, he wasn't joking. Then that forced him to go away and go, actually I need to check and see if there's anything that's problematic with doing exercise whilst on chemotherapy. He went away, did some research, and came back and said, actually, Luke, from the studies that I've read, which concerned mice rather than humans, that the mice that exercised during their chemotherapy, they had better outcomes. So, as long as you do it sensibly, and as long as you're, not burning yourself out, then, keep on exercising. And he later said that actually I tolerated the chemo a lot better than most people, and it kept my muscle mass higher, it kept my body in better condition, levels of fatigue lower. So it was a really significant part.
And Luke, with that in mind, you want to fly the flag for making sure that people with cancer exercise and keep active and keep doing what matters to them. That's why this evening we have this amazing panel. I'm going to hand over to you, Luke. Thank you so much. And I hope you enjoyed tonight, find it really informative, and we've got a fantastic panel who Luke will introduce you to. Thanks very much.
Awesome, thank you very much, Jemima, and thank you for TrekStock for putting on this event. Thank you, Samsung, for hosting us in this wonderful occasion. I've never, ever been in a place as swanky as this. I've been in like the mountains of Pakistan, and they have a majesty all of their own, but you know, this is going some. Guys, it's so nice that you're all here tonight. Everyone in the audience, both here in person at Samsung HQ and online. I can't see you. I'm going to look at cameras. I'm saying hi. Thank you so much for joining us all. Your time is really precious. I'm really grateful that you're sharing it with us. This probably means I should shut up soon because you want to hear from these people and not me. So I'll do a little introduction to our wonderful panelists. So to start with, on my left, we've got Dr. Philippa Kay. Philippa, you're a GP, you're a journalist, you're a mother, you wrote several books about menopause, about cancer. You yourself got bowel cancer at the age of 39.
Yep. Just slid on and under the TrekStock window at 40.
Ooh, not saw that. All right. And you've also been on, TV. You're sort of a resident doctor for ITV. You've been on BBC, Channel 4, Channel 5. Is there anything that you can't do, Philippa?
Yeah, team sports.
Team sports. Okay. I'll ask each of you in turn as well. This is all about movement this evening. What is your favorite way of moving right now? And what way would you like to move in the future?
So right now I am 10 days post-surgery. So my only real way of movement is walking. But normally I like to lift. And the way that I would like to move, powers that be in the virtual world, I want to be on Strictly. Desperately. So that is how I would like to move. I would like to learn to dance.
I love it. I love it. Okay, guys, BBC, anyone who's listening out, got the contact. This is your lady right here. Get her on Strictly. Can't wait for it. Can't wait for it. Looking forward to our conversations as well, Philippa. Next up, we've got Sean. Sean, you, at the age of 28, you just set up your own PT business. You were, working out multiple times a day, and you got diagnosed with stage 4 Hodgkin's lymphoma. Yep. That must have turned your life upside down and made running a PT business really difficult.
Yeah, so I was, as you said, I was 28 when I was diagnosed. I was training, I was powerlifting, so competitively at a national level, so competing across the country. Training a couple of times a day, some days, but training every day, working as a PT as well. But after my diagnosis, my doctor, like yours, wasn't probably less into the idea of exercise and recommended more rest. So after I was diagnosed, I basically didn't do very much. I would maybe go to the gym once a week, and that was just in between treatments. And the PT business is something I just completely I chose to stop. I probably could have continued.
Yeah. We'll get to more of your story in a second.
Okay.
But just to run through the panelists, what's your favorite way of moving right now? And what's the way that you want to be moving in the future?
So I'm doing Renew at the moment, so I get to move through that. So we'll talk about Renew a bit more later. And I would like to either get back to powerlifting or move. I did some MMA recently, some mixed martial arts, and I got beaten up, I would say, by the other people I was training with. I wasn't ready for it at all. So I'd like to maybe get back to that and maybe get my own back.
Awesome. Well, I'll be careful not to piss you off at this event. Otherwise, I might be ejected out the door in an unpleasant way. Next up, we've got Tom Cohen. You are an exercise physiologist and a cancer rehab specialist. You work out of Harley Street, which is a renowned sort of medical street in London, very prestigious. And you're also recognized as an expert by the Public Health England, Sport and Exercise Medicine UK, and you've been part of the Moving Medicine Project, which is all about how movement can help people, including people with cancer. The you've done a whole host of TV, podcasts, radio, magazines. But my favourite fact about you is that you were the first team sports scientist for Chelsea Football Club.
I was.
So, what is your favourite way of moving, and what would you like to do in the future? And is it going to be football?
Yeah, I'm a footballer, but like yourself, a very keen runner, cyclist, but can't claim to have actually completed the distance that you have. Super impressive, by the way, over COVID. And I actually just got back from Lisbon yesterday, where, to be honest, I was just in awe with all the surfing out there. So I think that's my new aim, is to become a surfer.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you. Cheers, Tom. Right, now we have Teresa. Teresa, you are one of the Renew instructors here at Trek Stock. I also saw you at Trek the City. You seem to be everywhere and always bouncing and full of energy. And yeah, you've been part of the Renew program for 4 years. What is your favorite way of moving, and how would you want to move in the future?
Well, I run. I lift weights, I love to be in the gym, and I also love to be in the outdoors, so I do a lot of long-distance walking. Did the South Downs walk recently, and I think I want to do a bit more of that. Maybe South Downs is a nice stepping stone. It's a fairly easy walk. It's a little bit up, a little bit down, but not too much, but there are far more challenging ones, so hoping to do some of the coast walks in the future.
Amazing. Great. We've got quite a powerlifting component here. I'm feeling out of my depth. I'm sort of like the skinny cyclist. Now, Liz, thank you very much for joining us. Also, Liz K. We have 2 Ks on the panel, so I can just say K, and it goes to multiple people. So you were diagnosed with breast cancer in 2017, it came back in 2021, so last year. You've done a whole load of sort of things with Trek Stock, the Trek the City, the menopause program, the Renew program, and something I'm really, if you're happy to talk about, sort of the relapse, losing motivation and then having to do it all over again. That sounds immensely difficult. But right now, what's your favorite way of moving, and how do you want to move in the future?
I guess my favorite way of moving at the moment is I'm finally back to running again. I'm a terrible runner, a bit like Phoebe from Friends, I guess. But I love the feeling of it. And I'm right by the sea where I live. So yeah, running by there every day is really great. But in the future, I guess I always like trying different courses, and I've done belly dancing, and I'd like to do something like pole or aerial or something, and try and build up my upper body strength, I think.
Wow, awesome. Thanks, Liz. That's great. I'd love to just see you come back in a year's time and see you doing all your activities you talked about. That would be great. For you guys here and for everyone watching, if you've got any questions, do just either keep them in your head or write them down, and you're going to get the chance to just fire your questions at everyone at the end. For now, we're going to open with a conversation with Philippa, with Liz, and with Sean. And then we're going to talk some more with Tom, and then we have a Renew exercise. So if I could just have Sean, Liz, and Philippa stay on, and Tom and Teresa, if you guys can leave, we can snuggle up. So, all of you were diagnosed with cancer. In fact, all of us have been diagnosed with cancer, and exercise has played, I guess, a big part in our own journey and our own treatment. I'd like to just hear a bit more from each of you about your own personal journey with cancer. I guess what you saw the biggest challenge to be, and what role exercise played in your life prior to that point. So, Liz, let's kick off with you.
Okay. Well, I guess for me, the first time round that cancer happened in 2017, I was 28, and I was really shocked about getting diagnosed with estrogen positive cancer, breast cancer, and it was growing really fast and it was aggressive, so they threw everything at it, I guess, like chemo, mastectomy, radiotherapy, and then the injections and everything to put me through a medical menopause. I think that's everything that there is.
It's a lot.
Yeah, so they did all that, and I was really, I had a lot of determination that of course I was going to fight it, and I'd been like a pretty healthy person beforehand. Like I'd always liked running, I liked yoga, but I also liked really high intensity cardio classes, and I just love being outdoors and being busy and having loads of energy, I guess. And the treatment just completely wiped me, and I was bedbound and in hospital a lot, so I was really unwell, and it was all I heard was just rest, like just get lots of rest and sleep and, take care of yourself in that way, which obviously does play a part, but I never heard from anyone about the importance of exercise, really. And then, when it came back again, I think I didn't feel as motivated as the first time round. It just felt like such a blow, because I felt like I was only just starting to get back to some sense of normality and back to some kind of health in my body. So
I'm quite interested there. One of the things that you were saying, you had this whole litany of treatments thrown at you, and the advice that you got told that you heard was rest, which ultimately isn't good advice. Well, it's within reason, but it has its place. But I think we've all experienced the power of movement and exercise. Sean, what were you told when you were diagnosed?
Yeah, I was told the same, really, to rest, even though I had been very physically active prior to my diagnosis, and all the way through the diagnosis process, through biopsy and whatnot, I was still active. So I was told to rest, and I'm was at the time of the thinking that if a doctor tells you to do something, it's best to do it. So that's pretty much what I did. I'd probably work out once a week at most after that, but I stopped doing the PT as that's a physical thing to be doing.
How did you feel after the workouts? Did you feel like a boost after them, or were you just even more tired and you're thinking I should be resting
honest,
more?
I wasn't tired. I didn't really get tired. I got sick along the way various times, various quite serious like infections and things like that, sepsis. But I never really felt fatigued. And maybe I thought because I'm resting, I don't feel fatigued, continue with the rest, so I didn't exercise.
Mm-hmm. And Philippa, you are a doctor yourself. It must have been a very weird experience going to another doctor and being told,
I wouldn't recommend it.
Yeah. And you should be like, well, I'm a doctor. Bad things shouldn't happen to me. I should be sort of medically invincible. What did your doctor tell you? And did you heed their advice, or did you think, I know better?
Doctors aren't really good patients. I don't think in general, but we also aren't superhuman, which means that we're not immune to disease just the same as anybody else. But my doctor didn't tell me not to exercise, and I wasn't a sporty person. I wasn't a sporty kid at school, and I wasn't good at team sports, and I wasn't good at running, and it made my boobs hurt, and I didn't like it. And I would say that before my diagnosis, I would do a 20-minute YouTube workout few times a week because I knew I had to, and there was the devil and the angel on my shoulder, and the angel would go, come on, and the devil would go, yeah, you're tired, you're busy, you work, whatever. And the devil would often win. And it was, between my diagnosis and my first surgery was a week. And I remember waking up, and the next day the surgeon came to see me and he went, you need to get up, and I laughed. I was like, you're joking. What do you mean I have to get up? I'm in so much pain and I can't feel my leg and whatever else. And they were like, no, you got to get up and you got to go. And I had a really good relationship with my physio, and getting up after major abdominal surgery where they remove part of your bowel is a task in itself. And I had a good relationship with the physio that got me going, and I really understood that power of walking. Even from something as simple as when you're on ICU, if you get up and you sit in a chair, you're going to breathe better than if you're in the bed. And you're already sick enough and you don't need pneumonia on top. And then I would
simple
say,
as just sitting up in bed.
sitting up in a chair.
In a chair.
Sitting up, yeah.
That can help.
And how big that is. And when you've had a major abdominal surgery, how big a deal it is to get up and how exhausting it is to get up.
And was it your doctor who told you?
My
get
surgeon.
Up? Your surgeon?
Get up.
And if he hadn't told you, you'd have
The
been like,
physio would have got me up.
Okay.
The protocol's like, get up.
Determined.
And then I would say that when I started my chemotherapy, my oncologist said to me that regular exercise was going to reduce my risk of recurrence as much as my chemo would. And that was before I started 6 months of chemo.
Wait, can you just say that again?
So he said, for me personally, with my particular cancer, my genetics, my history, et cetera, and it will be different for everybody, that regular exercise was going to reduce my risk of recurrence of bowel cancer, which is the thing that I was most scared of and am still most scared of, than the 6 months of what my kids called cancer poison that I was about to start. And we all know how serious chemotherapy is. And suddenly the devil on my shoulder went away. And I started exercising throughout my treatment. And I had multiple surgeries, including, in the middle of the pandemic, a 15-day stay in hospital, 10 days of which were in ICU. And up until the day of my bowel prep before, I was still doing exercise. And people were going, what are you doing? You're about to, have your whatever. And I would go, no, this is my prehab. This is how I go in with the most muscle mass that I can in order to do the best that I can. And on that first day in ITU, when I had bigger surgery and high-pec chemo, where they put ultra-heated chemo inside your belly, I was the one saying, get me up. We need to get up.
You went through a massive change.
Huge change.
Yeah.
And exercise is hugely important in that. And I would still say that I'm not sporty, because you don't need to be sporty and you don't need to be good at any of it. You just need to find the thing that you like and that you're prepared to do. And that's all that there is. And so I often don't say to my patients, sport. I say physical activity. What's going to keep your body movement? And I don't care what it is. And I'm never going to run a marathon. Just that's not what I want to do and not what I enjoy. You find the thing that you enjoy and you keep doing it. But I think that it's really important to be clear that we aren't saying, and I definitely am not saying, ignore your doctors, and that you have to get the balance between rest and recovery that your body undoubtedly needs, plus the exercise that it also needs and the physiological, physical, and mental health benefits that brings. And that balance is really difficult. But we're not saying don't rest, and we're not saying don't exercise. It's about finding that right balance for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think balance is always one of the things that's really important. And there are a few things I want to pick out what you said here, Philippa. And I think, first of all, this whole evening is about movement. It's not about, as you said, it's not about running marathons. It's not about doing long cycle rides. It's about moving in a way that you enjoy and you're happy to do so. And we got the Move Against Cancer 5K Your Way, whether it's running 5K in a park, whether it's, dancing, whether it's Strictly, whether it's, going to be, surfing or sailing. So I think that's really important. And I think one of the things you said there I found very interesting is this idea of what motivated you to start exercising, because you said you're not sporty, you don't come from that background. And it was and it was very specific to you. I know your cancer, your genetics, that actually for you, exercise was going to be essentially as effective as chemotherapy in sort of preventing a recurrence. And so I think it's quite an interesting idea to sort of talk about motivation now, motivation to exercise. What got us out the front door at those times when it's been really difficult?
It's important to also to say to people that if you always wait for motivation to come, you may be waiting for a long time. If you're waiting for time for things to be better, to feel better, for the moment where you have time or whatever, you're going to be waiting forever. And actually, it's not motivation that you rely on. It's about discipline and routine. And that once you get into the habit, I've got 3 kids. It was lockdown. The gyms were closed or whatever. And it was about finding the time when they know mummy's working out with that YouTube trainer. That's completely free. And then in the middle of homeschooling, it was Joe Wicks PE as well, with them that they can enjoy. And it's about a routine, because motivation isn't always going to be there, because there are going to be days where you don't feel like it. And when those days rack up, we can't keep listening to them. So we've got to keep going.
Yeah. So, Sean, how did you find this balance between motivation and discipline? And what motivated you, and then what kept you going in the times when you weren't motivated? Did you have this discipline that Philip is talking about? Because I've certainly had times when I should be doing this, and you know what, I still can't. I'm still going to just lie and just sit down, and it's just too difficult.
So prior to my diagnosis, motivation wasn't a factor. It was like Philippa has said, it was just a routine. This is what I did. That's what I would do every day. So it was just a part of life. But after the diagnosis, as I said, I was told to rest, and I did rest. I would occasionally go and exercise. I had a stem cell transplant in 2019, which is what's kept me in remission. So after that, I had a period of rest for about 4 or 5 months, just as is instructed after that treatment. But the motivation after that was just trying to get back into a semblance of the shape I was in prior to all of this happening. As I think with anyone who's been diagnosed with cancer, you find that it takes a lot away from you in terms of mental health and physical health. So for me, finding the motivation afterwards was just trying to get back to, not maybe to where I was before, because that was maybe an extreme, what I was doing, but trying to get back into a routine. So maybe 3 or 4 days a week to begin with, then 5 days, and then maybe 6, but that's maybe not as sustainable for me now. So it's just a case of wanting to be in shape, knowing what it does for my mental health, and just wanting to keep that going, really.
And was there something that when you moved into this phase of working out 3-4 times a week at the beginning, what got you out the door on those days that you didn't feel so motivated? So this discipline that Philippa's talking about.
This was mainly at home, so I would go for like an hour's walk every day during the summer. In the winter, not so much. But in the summer, I'd go for an hour's walk in the morning, first thing, and then I would do a workout at lunchtime. I was working from home, so I'd do a workout at lunchtime. And it wasn't difficult to get that going because I had the discipline from before. But I would say just for someone who hasn't maybe had that structure before, just as Philippa said, find that structure, make it a part of your day. Find 20 minutes, 30 minutes. It doesn't have to be an hour's walk. It could be 20 minutes walk. It could be 15 to start with. Could walk your dog, go for a walk with your partner, your kids, friends. Just find something so it doesn't feel like exercise. Because I think that's what keeps some people away from it, is that exercise can be difficult. That's the way it has to be sometimes to get into shape, some people would say. But it doesn't have to be. It can just be a walk. It can be something which is fun. Like I'm sure you find your bike ride quite enjoyable. I hope so, anyway.
I mean, plenty of times I was going up some steep hill where I absolutely felt, why am I doing this?
But just finding a reason to go out. So it could be with friends. It could be exercising along to a Joe Wicks or something like that, and just make it a part of your routine.
Big shout out to Joe. Thanks, Joe. You've been a big support, everyone here.
Yeah.
So, one thing that I find really interesting about what you said there, Sean, something I find as well, is when motivation is lacking, is like the importance of starting as small as possible. And like the idea, going for, a run or, going to the gym and working out, that can just be overwhelming. That can be daunting. And I remember when I was on chemotherapy, most of the time I just went for a walk. And the premise was I'm going to do something, and something is better than nothing.
Right. And that's good enough. If we aim for perfection, you're all going to fail. We aim for good enough. We aim for small steps. We aren't going to Beijing. You are, but I'm not, right?
Absolutely.
Let's be honest. I'm not going to Beijing, but I can get to the end of my street. And that might have been how it was at the beginning. And I think that's really important. I can think of really, really, really few conditions where somebody would be told bed rest. Really few. So even when they say rest, they don't mean lie down all day. They still mean walk, because there's very few times where that's not the case. And I think that when you say to people, go and exercise, they have a view of running up and down a muddy field in school that comes with, for lots of people, the trauma of that, and not being picked and whatever else, and all those barriers And what we're saying is just walk. Just start by walking, start by taking the stairs.
Yeah, and I think this is, Liz, can we go back to your story? Because you were told rest and you did rest. How did you make this, it must have been so difficult, this transition from resting, and the more you rested, the more you felt tired.
Yeah.
What started to change that cycle? Did you do these things that, we've been talking about of, starting small and getting bigger? Where did motivation, where did discipline come into your journey?
Well, I guess the main thing that changed everything for me was, this was before it came back the second time, but I was trying to start running again. So I was doing some walking, and like I said, in the first lot of cancer, I was much more determined, much more motivated to look after myself. So I was exercising a bit, and I was trying to start running again, and I kept getting really bad pains in my legs and aches all over. And I went and saw an oncologist because mine had changed, so it wasn't someone I'd met before. And they said to me, okay, so stop running. And I was like, okay, but for the future, how do I get back to, not having these pains all the time, they're horrendous. And they were like, well, you'll just have to walk. And I was like, but I used to love running and doing exercise, and I was 29 at the time, I can't just think, oh, that's it now, I'm not going to be running. They were like, well, that's what's causing the pain. And anyway, after sort of moving on from that, I spoke a lot to my friend who's a yoga instructor, and she just basically was like, yeah, start small, and we started doing things together, and then I started walking more, and I guess I lost that a bit when the cancer came back the second time, but then I saw about, because I'd already been involved with Trek Stock, I saw about the menopause program, and then the Renew exercise program, which I did with Teresa, and it just seemed like it was the motivation I needed to start taking care of myself again, because I didn't want to get old young. I just didn't want to do that. That's not how I imagine my life. I always imagined being really energetic and doing things right up until I'm 90. So it gave me that passion to sort of take care of myself again, and determination to do it as well, because it's a course, so that you've got to show up each week and do the best you can. But it didn't matter if I showed up and I wasn't feeling good. There was a time when I showed up in my pajamas because I was like, I don't feel great, but I'm just going to move.
I think that's so important, and I'm so grateful that you shared that showing up in your pajamas, just turning up, right? Just turning up, and whether you're as tired as anything and you can barely move, but you are still there, you're still doing something. I think that's in so many ways the core of setting these good habits, these good routines is just showing up, and it doesn't matter if you're rubbish, it's just beginning to build from that point.
I think it's really important to say a couple of things. First of all, what we're talking here is very, very general, and I don't want somebody to go away and think that we've given specific advice, because we haven't. Very, very general advice, and there may be times when you need to not go, and that you have to listen to that as well. I don't want somebody who, for example, is on a diet that's extraordinarily restricted, that cannot fuel their body, to be doing a huge amount of physical exertion when you may well be in what we call a catabolic state already, because you're healing, and that requires a huge amount of protein to heal in the first place after surgery. So that balance is really, really important, of actually today I can't, but tomorrow I will, but what can I do today? And to also say that chemotherapy, the exercise helps with side effects. It's not just about recurrence. It's not just about going in to surgery in the best state that you possibly can, knowing that when you are resting that you will lose muscle mass. It's also about reducing your symptoms at the time of your treatment, and improving your mental health. So yes, it takes energy to exercise, but it gives you energy to then get through the rest of your day. But you have to find that right balance for you. And so for some people, and the other thing that I think is that we have this idea that you have to be perfect, and that I want to be that person 6 months in the future, right? The person that can lift again, the person that can do whatever. And actually, that doesn't mean that you get to hate yourself right now, because you're strong now by the very fact that you turned up in the first place, and you want to be stronger, okay. You want to be something else more, but that doesn't mean that you're rubbish now. So you don't get to hate the person that you are when you're struggling, when you're modifying, when you're walking, not running, because that person is still strong and showing up and getting better. And I think it's really important that we have the right headspace around that.
Thank you, Philippa. Yes. Yeah, I think very importantly, listen to your doctor. Do listen to them, follow their advice. And what we're talking about is in general terms, specific to our stories, as some examples. I think we're coming to the end of this section. I'd love to close with a thought from each of you of two thoughts. One. What did you tell yourself on those bad days? Those days when you're finding it really tough to get out the front door. What was it that was in your head that helped? And maybe it's the same piece of advice, but there are going to be people watching this who are perhaps, in the situations that we were like a few years ago. What would you tell those people, who are struggling to get out the door? So maybe that's pretty much the same question. What's the motto? What's the piece of advice to help people get out the door? And Liz, we'll start with you.
I guess for me, it was just the fact that I knew that if I kept moving, I would be giving myself hope and freedom and independence, because when I wasn't moving and I was really ill, I was relying so much on my family to take me to places, and I couldn't go out and be with my friends and do all the things that I wanted to do. And actually, once I started moving, I just felt so much better that I was like, this is something that I've got to carry on even on the days when it feels like I can't. So yeah, even if it was just like a walk down to the seafront or just a small walk around the block, it was just like getting myself moving so that I didn't constantly sort of struggle with this fatigue that I had.
It gave you hope, and it gave you that bit more
independence.
Yeah, more energy and positivity in your mindset.
Definitely, absolutely.
Sean?
I'll sort of reiterate what Philippa has said, that you don't have to be perfect to start. When I started again after my a few months after my stem cell transplant, I started with a few days a week, whereas previously I would have worked out most days of the week, if not every day. I started off with 3 days a week, and that was fine for me. That's a great place to start if you can do that. If you can only do a couple of days a week, or if you can only do 15 minutes a day over the course of a week. Pardon?
Or 5.
5 days.
No, or 5 minminutes.
5 minutes?
Or 1 minute.
You can do, yeah, right, if that's what you can do, that's what you can do.
Yeah, if that's what you can do, then do it. You don't have to be perfect to go ahead. You just want to start somewhere and maybe set yourself some goals, but be kind to yourself as well. I think that's the biggest thing.
Thank you.
Especially if you've been relatively fit and active before, being kind to yourself. You've been through a lot physically and mentally. So being kind to yourself and saying, okay, I can't do what I did before my diagnosis or before treatment, but I can do this. And that's really good going for where I am now. So just having that mindset and just, being kind.
You are where you are now, and it's something that I think we've all said in different ways. You can only be where you are. Who you were a year ago is not indicative of your situation right now, and it doesn't dictate where you're going to be in 6 months' time.
Yeah.
So
Mine would be do it grumpy.
Do it grumpy,
right?
Okay.
There's this
Tell
whole
us.
idea about doing everything with positivity and joy, right? No one skips to chemo. Okay, no one does. We go dragging our feet, and sometimes we go stamping our feet, fed up, angry, pissed off, whatever else. And where you show your strength is the fact that you went anyway, right? You didn't want to go, and sometimes you go kicking and screaming, but you went anyway because you made the decision somewhere that that was what you needed to do. And if you make that same decision about exercise, do it grumpy, do it pissed off, say it hurts, say you don't want to. But go anyway.
I can't think of a better note than that to finish on. So do it grumpy, do it with a frown on your face, do it with a snarl.
And it will make you smile in the end. That's the whole thing about it.
There we go. We got a 100% guarantee from the doctor right here that you'll be smiling by the end. Get your refunds from her. Don't talk to me. Thank you so much, Philippa, Sean, Liz. It's been a pleasure. We'll get you on at the end for questions from everyone. But thank you so much.
Thank
Thank you.
And now we will have Tom join me on stage. Tom, do come on. Let's have a round of applause for Tom and a round of applause for Philippa, Sean, and Liz. How are you doing, Tom?
Good, thanks, Lee.
I don't know about you, but yeah, I'm after all of that.
I know, I've got a lot to live up to, haven't I?
Yeah, but I know we're going to have an absolutely fascinating conversation and perhaps dig a little bit more into the science behind everything that we've just heard. We've heard some amazing human stories here. But perhaps, Tom, you can just kick us off with a little bit more about your background, your specialism, and something I'm intrigued about is, why on earth did you choose to work with people with cancer? Because, we can be a grumpy lot.
So I'm an exercise scientist. Luke, I got a degree from Loughborough University in sport and exercise science, which is really what my passion has been since 2012 when I graduated. As you said at the start of the show, I sort of went into professional sport first and worked at Chelsea Football Club as a sports scientist there. Had 15 months with the club and then decided actually that I'd change my career path and I would use a lot of what I'd learned in terms of meticulous analysis and monitoring of exercise and looking at the physiological effects that exercise brings, but to actually adapt and to use that with a completely different population and to use it with clinical populations. So I specialise in exercise programming and prescription for cancer, but also for cardiac rehab as well.
And what was it that took you down the cancer route? Because, if I had Chelsea Football Club around, I might get a bit distracted by that.
I had a fantastic experience there and loved it. I think I was looking to change my career path, and then unfortunately a couple of unfortunate and very sad events happened in my life at the time, and I lost one of my best friends, unfortunately, to a brain tumour, and my granddad passed away from cardiovascular disease as well, from a heart attack. So, I think those two things had a big effect on me at the time, and I went into clinical exercise, as I said, and started working with patients one-on-one, and just got an amazing, I don't know, it was just an experience that I just felt like I was giving so much to people, and just had an amazing relationship with people and seeing them go through the most traumatic time in their life, but knowing that I was giving some sort of positive effect, hopefully, and helping them through that difficult time was just something that I just couldn't not continue doing, and just loved it. And that's where I did more qualifications in clinical exercise. So I'm a qualified cancer rehab instructor, as well as a cardiac rehab instructor as well. And I find it very rewarding, hugely rewarding to work with patients and to help them through their really difficult journey, and just to hopefully see them come out the other end as a new person, and hopefully fitter them and healthier than before their cancer diagnosis. Yeah,
and I think there's something very special about, I've wondered why the nurses and oncologists decided to focus on oncology, and helping people at their very lowest, I think, has a reward that is, that the ability, that advice, that help is almost at the most valuable time it could ever come. So I'd love to dig into a little bit more about, we talked about working out, we talked about exercising, moving, whether that's going for a walk, a 5-minute walk, 10-minute, just go downstairs for a cup of tea. It's anything, even as Philippa said, just sitting up in a chair rather than lying in bed. Can you talk us through what are the physiological effects of moving? So when we start to move around, what actually happens in our body, physically, mentally, some other Lee sort of way? What happens?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's a huge question, Luke, to be honest. There's lots and lots of different benefits that exercise brings.
Well, we've got all evening. These guys can stay here till midnight, so it's all right.
Both physically and mentally. So you touched on, I know Philippa and the other panelists have all touched on the psychological as well as the physiological impact that exercise brings and the benefits. I think Philippa mentioned the side effects, so reducing the severity, the occurrence of side effects that people may experience from all the different types of treatment that there are, be it surgery, chemotherapy, radiotherapy, hormone therapy, you name it, they've all got side effects. Point out that exercise is one of the treatments, if you can call it sort of an adjunct treatment that doesn't have negative side effects and can actually combat some of those side effects, as I said, and reduce that severity and the occurrence. We've talked about how exercise can also reduce the risk of cancer recurrence and reduce the risk of mortality. And that's not just cancer-related or cancer-specific mortality, but also all-cause mortality. So that might be, for example, different cancer treatments can have a negative effect on the cardiovascular system. So actually, if you're an older woman who's a cancer survivor with breast cancer, cardiovascular disease is the main risk factor, is the main sort of mortality risk, if you like, rather than the cancer itself. So exercise, we know, can improve cardiovascular fitness, which can help to reduce the risk of, or the risk factors related to cardiovascular disease, if you're thinking about hypertension, cholesterol, lipid profiles, etc. Exercise can improve body composition. We talked about the importance of muscle mass and maintaining that during treatment. And we know that a reduction in muscle mass is normally linked with or associated with an increased mortality risk and also just negative side effects, obviously, and that's normally an increase in the prevalence of those negative side effects. There's a whole host of different benefits. Luke, I'd be, I think, talking all day if I was to list them all, but perhaps if you wanted to go into a few of the specific cancer types or for the treatment-specific benefits, then
this is an evening all about movement, and as we discussed earlier, there's not a one-size-fits-all approach, right? Everyone on this panel, we had different types of cancer. There are different impacts and benefits of exercise or movement. Can you just talk us through perhaps some of the main ones and sort of what form of exercise would be most appropriate for each?
Yeah. So have you got?
Let's say breast cancer. Yeah. I think that's going to be a pretty common one. Prostate cancer and maybe bowel cancer. If we have those three, and
of course.
I had a sarcoma, but we're kind of niche, so
I'll start with breast cancer. I should say, obviously, just as Philippa said, that this is general advice, and you should always ask your oncologist or medical professional first before engaging in an exercise program to make sure it is suitable for your condition, your side effects, etc. So, with breast cancer, some of the main things that we think about, if we think about maybe the treatment that a cancer patient with breast cancer may have, surgery, maybe one, so a mastectomy, where the breast is removed. There may be lymph nodes that are removed as well. That's really important when you're devising an exercise program to think and to be aware if lymph nodes have been removed, because that puts the patient at an increased risk of lymphedema.
What is lymphedema?
So lymphedema is where essentially the lymph fluid is not being drained as well through or flowing as well through the body. So exercise, we know, can actually help to reduce that risk.
What does that look like? What does lymphedema look like if you get it in your leg?
It's typically swelling, which can be through the arm, and because you typically have lymph nodes removed up where the surgery site was. So exercise can help to increase that flow of lymph and to keep it moving, which can reduce the risk of lymphedema. It's often something that people are really scared of is that risk of lymphedema, and worried about exercising for fear of it actually causing the lymphedema. Whereas actually the exercise can help if it's done in the right way, and that's really key, that it has to be done correctly. It can help to reduce that risk. So some of the things that you might do. So some of the things that you might do is to avoid holding heavy weights down by your side. Okay, so if we're thinking about shopping bags, if you're applying it to everyday life, maybe wear a rucksack instead, if that's comfortable enough to do so. Take that weight away from your arms. If we're thinking about...
Or give it to your partner. Is that the other thing?
Your partner
we've got the excuse right there.
That's fine,
okay.
Obviously, you're getting the walking alongside them, hopefully at the same time, and we've talked about the benefits of walking already. But if we're thinking about an exercise setting, strength training, resistance training, whatever you want to call it, Holding the weight up on the chest, if you're doing squats rather than maybe down by the side, is a good adaptation that you could make to avoid doing that. Wearing a compression sleeve, compression garment is also a good thing to do to reduce that risk of lymphedema. Reducing, I won't go into all the details, but not doing what we call isometric contractions, which is a static type contraction in that area, is also a sensible way to go about it as well.
Okay, what about prostate cancer then?
Yeah, so prostate cancer, again, if we're thinking about surgery, and the prostate's being removed, so a prostatectomy, doing exercise before the prostatectomy, before that surgery, can be really beneficial to reduce the post-operative potential problems that might occur post-operatively. So specifically doing pelvic floor strengthening exercises, so doing pelvic floor exercises before, we know can reduce that risk of incontinence, so having issues around bladder issues, but around sort of incontinence and that in that area is improved by doing pelvic floor strengthening pre-surgery.
Right. Okay. So you need to get there before the surgery starts. You've got to do those exercises in advance and
try and get in there before the surgery. And then there's obviously the post-surgery. Again, when you've got to give a bit of rest time, obviously post-surgery, but when it's then appropriate to restart doing that pelvic strengthening work again is really key.
Yeah.
Just to touch as well, Luke, on prostate cancer, while we're going through it, another treatment that some people may go through with prostate cancer is hormone therapy or androgen deprivation therapy, ADT, which is where testosterone is reduced or is blocked in the body from having an effect. So that is to try and suppress the tumour growth, but actually that can have quite a lot of effects on the body. Testosterone, we know, is really important around muscle mass and maintaining muscle mass, so resistance training becomes even more key, more critical to try and maintain that muscular strength.
It's amazing hearing you talk right now, Tom, because of, it is so specific to the cancer, to the type of treatment that you're going through. Everything from like needing to do strength training to other times, you need to be thinking not just about whether you can use your arms or not, but whether they're down here or they're up here. It is very specific, isn't it?
It can be.
Yeah.
But I think, Luke, what the main message is, and I want to reiterate this because it echoes the other panelists as well, is that movement is really key. Whatever you're doing, and obviously you don't want to be doing the wrong things, and you shouldn't be doing the wrong things for you. And we've talked about some of those with the breast cancer example there, and having a mastectomy. But actually, inactivity, avoiding that is the key thing. And there was a study, a really important study for anyone who wants to read it, that was done in 2018. Which was an international roundtable that was put together by the American College of Sports Medicine. So that was a group of experts that all came together and essentially produced a consensus statement around exercise. And they said that exercise is generally safe for cancer patients. And one of the key points that they brought away from that meeting, but that study, was to avoid inactivity at all costs. So, and that's not to say all the time, because as I think Philippa rightly pointed out, rest and recovery is really, really important to factor in, and that's for anybody, whether you've got a cancer diagnosis or not. Rest and recovery is a super important part of any training program, and something that we should always remember as being super important. Sleep is obviously critical, but yeah, to try and avoid that inactivity, to break up your sedentary time is really important. And that doesn't mean it has to be structured exercise. It could be gardening. It could be playing with your grandchildren. It could be playing with your brothers and sisters in the garden. It could be, dancing, going to the shops, going for a walk, parking your car at the furthest car parking space from the shop to just give you a few more steps. All of that counts, and it's important.
And I love that it's avoiding inactivity. It's quite it's an interesting way of reframing it. It's not necessarily about I got to go out and be super active. It's just avoid sitting on your bum for long periods of time. And I think that's part of a wider body of research that's saying sitting down is incredibly unhealthy for us in various different ways. I think one thing that would be really interesting to touch on is, what are the warning signs if you think you might be overdoing it with being active, with moving? Because as we said, balance is an incredibly important thing. What are the key signs that you're getting that balance wrong?
Yeah, I think listen to your body is really important. And if you're feeling fatigued, if you're feeling tired, take a break. Don't necessarily push yourself through it if you're not feeling right. If you've got certain side effects, such as nausea, for example, if you're going through chemotherapy and you're sick, don't exercise. Rest and recover. And when you feel able to, start small. Start short. Do a 5-minute walk around the block if you feel up to it, or just go up and down your stairs if you can. Walk around the house if that's all that you can manage. Listen to your body. There's tools that you can use to monitor your exercise intensity. Usually we recommend moderate intensity exercise, particularly if you're new to an exercise program or you're new to exercising. There is some evidence and some research to suggest some benefits around high intensity and vigorous training as well. But if you're new to exercise, or if exercise is a bit more new to you, and specifically around sort of treatment, moderate intensity is the way to go, and that generally to improve energy levels, etc.
And just to double click on that, when you're going through chemotherapy or radiotherapy or surgery, you're going to feel tired anyway, right? You've got all this weird tiredness sensations. So is there, you can listen to your body, but do you have anything more to say about what the bad type of tiredness is at a time when you feel sick and you feel tired and groggy?
Sure. I think you can think really, if we're talking about chemotherapy, Luke, then and you're going through multiple cycles of chemotherapy and it's every 2 or 3 weeks, you're probably likely to feel quite bad. Maybe you've had steroids and it just gives you that artificial sort of boost for a few days in terms of your energy levels. But and it depends on the type of chemotherapy drug that you're having, but a few days after having chemotherapy is likely to be when you're at your worst and feeling at your complete worst. So maybe to rest in the first few days after chemotherapy, then are you able to, maybe at the end of that first week, start doing a little bit of lighter exercise, maybe some walking around the block, and then typically that week, maybe leading up to the next bout of chemotherapy, is maybe when you're feeling at your best and your most strongest. So that might be where you can maybe do a little bit more. And it's not to say, you're going all out and doing huge exercise sessions, but if you're walking 5 minutes in at the end of week 1, then in that week before chemo, is it maybe 10, 15 minutes, or could you maybe do a strength session at that point? And it's I think, just touching back, Luke, I missed it out earlier, but a point that you mentioned of the type of exercise to do, to think really holistically about exercise. So to think cardiovascular exercise, really important, gives different benefits and different physiological effects to what resistance training would do. Resistance training being either with body weight or with using weights or some other external resistance like a resistance band. Flexibility training, balance training, all of these things are really important to factor into that exercise program. And some are perhaps more important than others for different population groups. So for example, patients who maybe have metastatic cancer that spreads to the bone metastases, I should say, where the cancer spreads to the bone, or maybe they've had hormone therapy that's affected the bones, to do balance training with something there to support you when you're doing the balance training, I should point out, is important. So maybe a chair or a wall that's fixed is really important to improve your balance, so you're reducing your risk, hopefully, of falls. And that goes for strength training too, to develop the muscles to reduce that risk of falls is really important, because the bones are more fragile, they're more at risk of fracture.
And hopefully, so that, we've got that mixture of resistance and cardio. We're going to have a bit of a taste of that as a mini break shortly, and Teresa leads us in a renew session. I think on the point about exercise and fatigue, or we should be saying movement and fatigue, from my own experience, the first time I had chemotherapy, which was ifosfamide and doxorubicin, two sort of fairly nasty drugs that make you feel pretty sick and tired. I remember, I think 3 days after leaving hospital, I decided to go for a cycle ride. I still felt like tired and groggy, but I was like, oh, to hell with it, sort of, I don't know, I give it a go. And then it just put me up in bed for the next 3 days. And I learned myself my own limits, that, I needed a week out of hospital of doing very little, like going for gentle walks, before I was then able to exercise a bit, and I would know I hadn't overdone it because I wasn't completely wiped out the next day. So that was quite an interesting learning point.
And generally, moderate intensity exercise, Luke, is the way to go. And if you're thinking about how to monitor that and how you can sort of ensure that you are keeping to those levels, there's lots of different ways that you can monitor your exercise intensity, and that can be really easy with what we call subjective measures. So RPE is one of those. RPE stands for rating of perceived exertion. So it's a bit of a sports science fancy term for really just saying, how difficult is this exercise to me? How does it feel? And that's a really simple scale. It can be a 0 to 10 scale, where 10 is maximal. It's an all-out intensity. Maybe if you're sprinting to get a bus that's just about to pull off, 0 is rest. And really moderate is about 3 out of 10. So it's a really nice sort of moderate, low intensity, feels nice and comfortable. There's other things that you can do as well. You can do a talk test. So if you're able to exercise and still maintain a conversation with someone, so like I'm doing with Luke now, that would be moderate intensity. If I'm starting to take a few more breaths in between less words, then that intensity is getting a bit more vigorous and a bit more intense. You might want to just back off the intensity a little bit, bring it back down to a moderate level. There's heart rate zones you can get set up by a sports scientist. Exercise physiologists can work those out for you, and you can find just general guides as well on percentage heart rate zones to work to get a moderate intensity exercise.
Well, I like that, the test of, if you bring a friend with you, you can have a conversation with your friend, you're doing all right, you know, that you're probably within the right kind of zones. The final question I want to ask you, Tom, right now is, I guess when someone, let's put our shoes, because there are going to be some healthcare professionals who are watching this, and when you've just told someone they've been diagnosed with cancer, it's the worst news that you can give pretty much anyone. How do you have any suggestions of how you then start broaching the conversation of exercise or movement? Because there's already too much on my plate. I remember when the doctors told me, like, my world just disintegrated and, you know, I couldn't hear anything. How do you deal it from the other side?
Yeah, I think I was involved. I was part of the moving medicine group Lucas you mentioned earlier, which was this initiative by the Faculty of Sport and Exercise Medicine UK. And the idea behind that was to review a lot of the evidence around exercise and cancer, to say what the outcomes were that exercise gave and how much evidence there was behind that. But to also, and a really important part of the project, was to help healthcare professionals and oncologists to be able to broach that subject of exercise and how to get patients moving, because there's more and more evidence that's coming out and that's emerging around the benefits of exercise. So how can we maybe get oncologists and other healthcare professionals who exercise might not be, you know, their specialism, their specialty, but how can we simply get them talking about it and get that idea across to the patient, to get them thinking about it, so that hopefully then the patient can then look online, look at Macmillan, look at Trekstock, look at Move, look at the cancer-specific charities that are out there, like Prostate Cancer UK, etc., and to find out more information for themselves if they wanted to. So Moving Medicine UK, the website, that is a really good tool, I think, and a really good resource for healthcare professionals to go to. Within that resource, within that website, then there's different conversation lengths. So, as you said, a lot of time might be taken up about in the conversation with the patient around the diagnosis and maybe what the treatment's going to be, and there might not be much time to discuss exercise, but there's, on the Moving Medicine website time, if the oncologist, if the healthcare professional's got a bit more time, there's a 5-minute conversation. You can go into a bit more depth.
So go onto the Moving Medicine website, have a look there.
I think it's a good resource.
And that can give you a few pointers. Well, Tom, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure chatting. We're going to be bringing you back on at the end for some more questions from everyone. But now is time for a quick break for Teresa to come up and lead us in a mini renew session. So, Tom, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
Teresa, if you come on. And then, so what I thought would be more interesting than just sort of Teresa doing some general moves and demonstrations is if, Philippa, are you happy to be our guinea pig? So, Philippa, you just 10 days ago had an op. There are certain things that you can and can't do, and maybe you can tell Teresa now. And I feel that this is more realistic, you know, of how the Renew program would work, because it's working with, you've got people who have got various different capabilities at different points. and it caters to everyone.
No, definitely.
So I will pass it over to you. Let's have 5 minutes of putting Philippa through her paces, and then everyone else, I'd like us to do the same things as well. So I'll move off stage, but you'll still see me prancing around.
Right now.
I have had abdominal surgery. Kind of thing, which means that although I can bend down that way,
Okay.
you know, I think anybody that's had surgery knows the post-surgical shuffle where you get out of bed like this because you've been cut somewhere in your belly. So that's where I am.
So we won't be doing any serious abdominal exercises with you either. But there are a lot of different exercises that are still really good for anyone. So whenever we have people in the Renew program, I get a list of all of their things that they're not supposed to do if they've been told any of those things. I find out how long it's been since they've had treatment, if they're going through current treatment. And if I have any questions, I do kind of ask them individually. Also, at the beginning of all of them, we have a chat just to see how everyone's feeling on the day, because how you feel today may not be how you feel next week. So some days you're raring to go, and other days maybe not. So I'm going to take this, as Luke said, or as Tom said, in a very moderate point, and I'll give different modifications on some exercises. So I would always start with just a little bit of a warm-up. So let's just start standing. If anybody wants to join in, I'd actually really
Come on, I'm
encourage it,
Mr.
'cause
Motivated
it is
tonight, let's
really
go.
boring to exercise with people sitting. We've been sitting too long anyway. Okay, so let's just start with just a gentle march. So you want to make sure that you're standing nice and tall. You've got your chest lifted, your shoulders down, back and down. And you're just lifting up through those knees, using the arms normally. You're swinging through the shoulders. Look around, take some nice deep breaths. Smile. It really upsets me when I take a class and I get all these glum faces of people. They're like, oh no, what are we going to do? I'm not going to do anything terrible, right? We're just going to walk. Take it a little bit here. Give me a little tap forward. So we're just getting a little stretch through those ankles, through the hips. There we go. And then take it to the side. Let's add some arms, just opening up through the chest, so getting a little stretch. This is a really good bit, especially for anyone that's had some breast cancer. We need to move and get movement and mobilization through the chest muscles. Take it across here. Looking good.
Can we take these moves to the nightclub later?
We could. Yes, well, when I teach the Renew class, I usually put slightly better music on, but anyway.
Ooh.
Let's pick up the knees if you can. We can pick it up a little. Thank you. There we go. Picking it up. So take it wherever you feel comfortable. So Philippa may not want to bring the knee up quite so high today, but anyone that hasn't had abdominal surgery, let's bring the knee up. Looking good, good. Rotating a little through the chest so we get movement through the torso.
As the case may be, not really.
Excellent. And then take it back down. Here we go. Let's go back to that side tap here. Make it a big one. So we're going to add a row. We're pulling back. Use those back muscles. You can tap back if you like to this time. Good. We want to use the biceps. We want to use the back. And then take it back here. Roll the shoulders back. Set yourself out here in a nice squat position. So feet underneath the hips, shoulders. Abs pulled in just a little bit. When you're ready, we're going to try sitting down. If you feel uncomfortable in the squat movement, we're going to try tapping down to the chair behind you. So just tap down. Keep those arms in front of you. Take it shallow if you've got recent abdominal surgery. Take it a little bit deeper if you can. Neutral back. Tummy nice and tight. We can add the arms to it. Pull back. Get a little more work through the shoulders, chest, biceps.
Honestly,
Beautiful.
if you'd have told me in medical school that I was going to end up demonstrating an exercise, probably would have laughed at you.
So the squat, you can relax briefly, have a little breather. Just keep the legs moving if you can. Pump through the legs just a little bit. The squat works, obviously, the thighs, but also the bottom if you're squeezing it just a little bit. Let's go up to the upper body now. So arms in a nice goal post position. We're going to go for a press high. If you have any troubles with reaching overhead, just take it forward, slightly ahead of you rather than overhead. It's looking good. Beautiful. Nice and high, and if you can, bring them in. Getting a little work through the chest muscles, again, and through the shoulders. Looking good. Take it a little bit higher now. Let's pull down. So we're reaching up and pulling down. Again, if you cannot bring that arm up nice and high, you're going to keep it a little bit lower. That reduces the intensity, bringing the arms down. Still moving through the legs. Beautiful.
Teresa, can we have 2 more minutes or so? Is that good? Thanks.
And then take it back down. Going back to the legs. Legs are the biggest muscles here, especially the bottom. Feet hip width apart into a squat position. Or into a lunge position. Hips facing forward. Abs pulled in, coming down, and come back up. Squeeze that bottom. Stay on the same leg. Focus on something to keep that balance. Looking good. Should start to feel a little bit of work in that front working leg. A little work through the bottom here. Maybe one more. Yes, and then take it to the other side. You've got the other leg. Here, abs tight, going back down. This helps balance. It helps the legs, helps the bottom, helps the abs. If we had some weights or a band or some tin cans, I might do some curls here. Give me one more, and then shake it out. Let's finish off with a little bit more cardio. So, strong march as your easier option. A light jog if you are up to. That's not for her right now. If you want to go even harder, use the arms. Swing them back and forth. Maybe give me some punches forward. Make it count. Pick up those heels. Excellent. Drum it down. Heels up. Walk it out. Get a little stretch. You might have felt just a little bit of work through those legs. Let's tap it back into that lunge position, bringing the heel down. Reach forward, push away. We've got a little work here, a little stretch through the back of the leg, a little stretch through the upper back. Come back, other side. Heels down, nice neutral back. Reach forward. Bring the arms back. Let's stretch out that chest a little bit. Arms here to the back. Lift up. Take a gentle bend. And here. Roll the shoulders out. One more stretch for the legs here. A bit of a heel dig. Push back. You're going to feel that stretch down the back of the legs. It's the part that always feels a little tight, especially if we sit too much. Lovely. If you have any issues with these kinds of stretches, you can also do a lot of them sitting or on the floor. But since we're standing, we'll stay here. Last one for the leg. Hold on if you have any issues with your balance or just want to have a little support. You're going to stretch the front of the leg. Pick up one leg, heels to the bottom. Think about really good posture. Feel free to let go if you don't need to hold on. Get that full body stretch, get a little balance. And then the other side. One leg up, here. Dangerous of exercising in a small room with the chairs. Anyway, march it out. Last one. Reach down into that squat, reach up. Nice and high. Give yourselves a hand. Great.
Thank you so much, and huge well done, Philippa, as well.
Actually,
our amazing workout. It's an amazing 10 days after escaping the hospital, showing what you can do. Like, I think, I like a lot of people after surgery would be thinking, I've got to, I can't do anything for quite a long time. And it's great to have the experts on hand who can show us how to do it safely. So, Teresa, Sean, can you guys take the stage, and we'll have a conversation about 10 minutes, 15 minutes about the Renew program that TrekStock provide and run. We've got about 10 minutes of discussion about the Renew program, and then we've got time for some questions. Teresa, thank you so much. I hope the lighting isn't too strong, because there might be some sweat patches right now. Thanks for leading us in that Renew program. We've sort of just done it, but can you tell us what is the Renew program?
Right. It's a way of getting people to exercise safely with a bit of camaraderie. I started doing this with TrekStock about 4 years ago. We did it in person, and then we quickly went to online during COVID. And it's been a way for people who either have never exercised before and are now thinking it would be something that it might help. Their doctor may have told them it's a good idea. Or for people that used to exercise and really want to get back into it. And it's just a way of doing it safely. I think a lot of people are a bit concerned about going and doing it on their own, going off to a gym, or just trying to figure out what they could possibly do at home with what little they have. Mm.
So thank you, Teresa. And so we've got, at the time when you don't know if you exercise or not, it's a way of making sure you can do it safely. It's a way of doing it with other people. Sean, how do the classes work? Are we going to be put in a class with like Tom over there? With his football training? How does it work?
Yeah. So before you would start, you would go through a series of questionnaires that you'd have to fill out with TrekStock, the team at TrekStock. They would set that out for you, and then that information would go to your Renew trainer, such as Teresa or myself. We would look through that and see if there's anything that we would have to be mindful of when we do exercise. So how it works is it can be one-on-one if it needs to be, if someone decides that they want to have one-on-one, or if there's a reason to have one-on-one training. But personally, I do group classes. So currently one of my groups is 6 people. Hopefully get 6 people to come in, and then we'll go through exercises. We'll look at different alterations to exercises. So you might do, for example, a push-up, and there are different variations of a push-up that you can do dependent on your level. So that's basically how it would work. You would have all of the assessments at the beginning. You'd have a Renew trainer look at those, decide what we're going to do in the classes. There is sort of a structure to it. So there are fitness tests at the beginning, the 4th week and the 8th week. So that's not to say, oh, well done, you've hit a certain goal, but just to see where we're at, see if we are progressing. But we do have to be mindful that there's not necessarily going to be a linear progression for people who are going through a diagnosis. You're not necessarily going to get stronger and fitter from week to week. But just again, as I said before, just be kind to yourself. You've done well just showing up. So that's how it works.
Yeah, and then like sometimes actually just, if you're going through chemotherapy, I experience, you still just go downhill, but exercise or movement means that you go downhill a lot less slowly, and that's still a huge win, right? What about people who, maybe their surgery, they had surgery, they've had a limb, that's been amputated, or people who have had a stoma, or people who have significant concerns from their treatment about joining? What would you have to say to them, Teresa?
I've had people with stomas. I've had people with lymphedema or with worries for lymphedema. We're always able to work around whatever the issue is. If I have any concerns, I go back to the person and have them have a good word with their doctor and perhaps find out really what they're concerned about. If it's lymphedema, if they're concerned about heavy weights, we're not using particularly heavy weights. Sometimes I have suggested they wear a compression sleeve. For someone with a stoma, abdominal exercises will be adjusted to that one. You know, I won't have them do full sit-ups or anything like that. We might do simple leg taps, still using the tummy muscles, even some seated ones if necessary. There's always ways of working around it, and what you find is that in a group of 5 or 6 people, people will have some different issues, but that doesn't mean they can't do most of the exercises in some way.
Mm-hmm. And the classes, are they now all online? So you kind of do everything through a laptop screen, or are they still happening in person as well?
All my classes at the moment are online. I'm not sure if there's some plans to move them back in person, but at the moment, I believe everything's online.
Yeah.
So wherever you are in the country, you
Yeah.
can tune in.
I've had people from all over the UK, lots of people from Scotland, and I even had someone join in when they were on a holiday in Canada, and so it was a far different time zone. So it's been, you know, quite helpful. I think I did start primarily doing one-on-one and groups in person, and then we went online. I think the main benefit to that is that people actually can almost always attend, whether it doesn't matter where they are.
Yeah, so I can be on holiday in somewhere sunny, and I can still join the programs throughout the winter here.
And a few people have done that. I had in my last group, one girl was in France, and she brought some small resistance bands, and we did some exercise.
Brilliant, amazing. I love the idea of doing it on the beach with a cocktail in my hand, you know, like, as long as I can get like the Wi-Fi out there, that sounds great. What are some of can you just tell us, I'd love to hear a story from each of you of, like, you know, the impact you've seen it make on someone's life. So, you know, of course, sort of keeping people anonymous as appropriate, but, like, can you tell us about someone who came and what they were like at the beginning, and what the Renew program helped them achieve?
I'm quite new to the Renew program, so I've not had as much experience as Teresa, but I have had some feedback. So at the end of my sessions, I'll ask for feedback about how difficult the session was, if there's anything I can modify, if there's anything I can help with. And just last week, I had a message back from someone after the class saying that it was a difficult class, but it made me feel more like myself. So the person who I was working with, she was part of a group, but she had, basically she wanted to get back to cycling like yourself, maybe not as far as yourself, but she wanted to get back to cycling, and her feedback was it was a difficult class. Maybe we can adjust some things, but it did make me feel more like myself. So that's really good feedback to have. It's definitely making a difference to her, and hopefully the rest of the class as well.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, and I've found that exercise has always been something that's like reclaiming my own identity, you know, sort of getting back to myself. Teresa?
Yeah, I've had people say very similar things, that they feel like they can now just be the person that they used to be in a lot of ways, or even do things that they hadn't thought they could do even before. So I have had a few people that have never exercised before coming to the class, and I think that by the 8th week they were just amazed that, you know, they can do some press-ups, they can, you know, do some light jogging, they can do all kinds of things they never thought they could do before. And I've had a few people, I've had one person that actually decided to go and train as a yoga instructor after doing the class. I don't teach yoga, but I do some yoga style moves, I suppose, with the stretches at the end and the recovery. And so that was great. And someone else who decided that they were going to start running. Then they had never run before. So that was really inspiring.
Oh wow! So you've seen some big changes then,
yeah.
and like the ongoing impact as well.
Oh, definitely.
And so we'll wrap it up here. One final point, and then we'll bring everyone on for the questions. But you know, in a nutshell, why do the Renew program? What are you going to be getting out of it?
So as someone who comes onto the program, you're going to be getting someone who, like myself or Teresa, has done training to help you after you've had a cancer diagnosis, whether you're going through treatment or whether you're post-treatment, to exercise safely and hopefully get you to a place where you do feel back to yourself, or that you feel able to achieve things which you hadn't been able to do before, and to do that in a safe way.
Thank you. Yeah.
I think
Anything to add, really?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is confidence. I think people feel that going through so much that and people are saying sometimes, just rest and don't do anything, and you stop doing some things, and you then all of a sudden feel, oh, well, I can't do it anymore. But having the confidence to actually move your body the way it can move and the way it makes you happy is really important. And I think that's probably the main thing out of the Renew program, is just giving people confidence to exercise and to do the kinds of things they want to do.
I think that's huge. Like, confidence is huge in being that person you want to be, and that's one of the first things that you lose when you get diagnosed with cancer. I just wanted to sort of circle back on one final point. Can anyone do the Renew program? Anyone diagnosed with cancer?
Teresa's probably best.
I would say it depends on their medical team. I mean, there may be quite a few people that are quite ill, that are going through rather serious chemotherapy, or maybe just out of surgery, and they may find that the program is a little bit too strenuous right away. But I think most people can do some physical activity, whether that is just starting with a walk and starting with some movement. I think sometimes Trek Stock has been able to match people with one-on-one, where they can do very much more low level than perhaps some of the group classes are. Most of the group classes are moderate. So what we did just now was fairly similar to what I would do. It would be 40 minutes of that with lots of breaks, with a bit of chat. We would do a bit more than that, but it would be a similar kind of level, and I would give options. So if you're not comfortable moving around for half an hour or 40 minutes, then you might find that that's too much at the time.
Yeah. So as one of the other threads from tonight is, your medical team, listen to what they say.
Exactly.
Do it within medical advice.
Do it with the advice.
Yeah.
If you find that actually, only maybe 15, 20 minutes is what you can do, that's good. You can do some of the other kinds of, I think there are some good videos Trek Stock has put on that you can do some exercise that way, and then hopefully get onto one of the programs.
Yeah, and so there are multiple resources that Trek Stock have, not just the Renew program. I don't know if Jemima, she was going to do a little talk about the other things that they can offer, but there are, sort of Trek the City, there are other sort of just bowling meetups, there are just different things, different activities, and you can check on the website for a bit more information about all of those. I'd now like to invite our wonderful panelists back to the stage for a sort of Q&A session. And to kick things off with the questions, I'd love to see if we got any questions from the audience. I'm also going to check from Jemima, who I think has sent me some questions through. Yeah, please kick us off.
Can we get a mic?
Oh, getting a mic for you, I think. So you'll be heard online as well.
One, two.
Oh, there we go.
So, Tom, what I was saying, is regarding leukemia patients. Usually, when we're getting treatment, our hemoglobin is down, platelets, everything, and we're completely told we're risk of fall, and we're not going to the hospital. We're like an inpatient during all our treatment. Like for example, me, I remember that I could barely walk to the toilet. So I remember that I always asked and pushed to get some exercise, and they sent me like a physio person to help, but it will be more like move your, literally from sitting and stuff like that. But I was thinking if there's any further advice that you have, because sometimes we hear this, and then maybe we'll say, oh yeah, well, I'm a leukemia patient, then I should have done more. But then maybe it's like, no, well, let's hear what you maybe have in mind or what you have seen with
Yeah,
people
I think the advice is really individualized. Like, it would depend completely from what might be suitable for one patient, might be completely different for another patient. Yes, if you're sort of bedbound or really struggling to walk, then there are exercises that you can do, as I think your physio suggested, that would be suitable to be done from your bed. And that could be abdominal exercises, that could be leg-based exercise with a resistance band, which you could make relatively challenging, whilst staying completely in your room. You know, if you needed to, you could do sit-to-stands on a chair. There's a whole host of different exercises that you could do.
Yeah, that makes sense. I just thought that maybe there was something else that maybe you know, but yeah, that
Nothing
makes
specific.
sense.
But let's also be clear that if you've got, for example, your hemoglobin is affected, your hemoglobin is what your red blood cells which are carrying oxygen around your body. Your heart rate is already likely to be higher. And lots of leukemia patients may need blood transfusions, for example. If your hemoglobin is so low you need a blood transfusion, that is not the time to be, you know, even going for that 15-minute walk, most probably. So it's about getting that balance about what is right for you. There's a really big difference between circling your ankles in the bed, which is going to help you decrease your risk of blood clots, for example, sitting in the chair so that you can move your diaphragm and take a really deep breath. And that might be enough versus doing something else. And I think that what you will be able to do will change at each point during your treatment.
Yeah, brilliant. Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that that's because otherwise we patients can take it. Oh, well, they said, well, let's use. And I just remember, like, I really couldn't. Like, I was really unwell.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Thank you very much. So we've got, I'll sort of balance, we've got questions coming in from online, so I'll sort of try and balance it between online and in the room as well. We've got another question on this topic, which is, for Tom, what is the latest research on cancer regarding fatigue? So how can exercise combat fatigue? Because I think probably everyone who's been through cancer faces that, and Liz, you talked about that. So what does the latest research tell us?
Yeah, fatigue is obviously the number one most common side effect of cancer and the cancer treatments as well, common to radiotherapy, chemotherapy, and just cancer itself generally. Moderate intensity exercise is generally the best intensity to combat fatigue. It's seen as exercise is seen as the number one way to combat fatigue. And there's research out there to sort of suggest that the National Comprehensive Cancer Framework in the US, that's exactly what they say is the number one way to combat fatigue is through exercise.
So that's basically what the latest research is coming out. There's just more and more evidence saying do moderate exercise, and so that's you can talk in pace.
Exactly as we said earlier.
Yeah.
But I think just reiterating what we've said all the way through, it's maybe not always appropriate if you are fatigued and you're extremely fatigued, then rest, listen to your body. Don't feel that you need to get out as an exercise that day. Can you maybe do it the next day? If you feel a little bit better, if your energy level's a little bit better, can you do it? And can you do it then? And there's some. I'm sort of thinking there's some studies that have suggested that walking has a positive impact on sleep as well, which then again may have sort of a bit of cyclical effect and then improve energy levels for that patient as well. So another way of combating fatigue, improving energy levels.
Lots of patients will know, actually. They'll say that on some days I feel tired, and when I walk after 10 minutes, I feel better. Versus on some days when I walk after 10 minutes, I don't feel better, I feel worse. Those are the days to not keep going. And I think that you have to learn what those days are for you.
Yeah. Listen to your body. When you start feeling worse, even after a small amount, that's something to listen to. Questions from the room? Yes.
Thank you. Oh, hello.
We can hear you.
Good. It was really helpful to hear some tips specific to breast cancer and a few tips around lymphedema risk, particularly. So I've had lymph nodes removed in one arm, and so kind of as I'm thinking about getting back into exercise, I am really nervous doing anything other than kind of like cardio or like Pilates. I'm a bit nervous, especially on the kind of the strength training side, what I can and can't do. And obviously I have talked to my medical team about it, but I have had kind of a range of advice. At one point, someone on my medical team kind of quite offhand mentioned like a 7 kilogram limit, but then seemed to backtrack on that. So I didn't know if there's kind of any more tips or specific advice on kind of exercising safely, but not risking lymphedema. Thanks.
Yeah, I can take it if you like. So firstly, obviously, there will be a bit of a recovery after the surgery, etc. And the first aim with exercise after mastectomy is to try and regain range of motion in the shoulder. So you may have felt restricted movements, particularly overhead type movements. So Breast Cancer Now, that's a resource online that has really good resources around some of the flexibility exercises that you can do to regain range of motion at the shoulder, particularly overhead exercise, which is, I think, week 2 maybe of it. The initial isn't overhead, and then you build and progress to that. So it's a progressive program of mobility, work and flexibility training. And then once you've regained that range of motion, then you're in a much better position to start to think about lightly loading the chest, essentially, and redeveloping that strength in the chest as and when your medical team really gives the go-ahead to progress the resistance training. And that can be, as I think Sean was saying, modified versions of chest work. So we might think of the press-up as being one exercise, one resistance exercise that can develop the strength and the muscular endurance in the pectoral muscle in the chest. Doing a wall press, for example, against the wall, so standing, can be a very light intensity way of doing it as you regain your confidence. And I think that's something that we should really stress, as well as that psychological effect of regaining the confidence. Not only you're regaining your strength, but also regaining the confidence and feeling as though you're comfortable with doing certain exercises. Once you've built that confidence of doing a wall press, maybe you can walk your feet a little bit further away from the wall, change the angle, load up the chest a little bit more, and just gradually over time regain or progress the intensity of that exercise and regain that strength.
Anything to add from any other panelist? I've got another question from online, which is sort of asking about menopause and the impact that exercise has. So I'm wondering, Liz, do you have anything to sort of talk about on that, and then maybe as well afterwards, Philippa?
I mean, obviously, Philippa, being a doctor, will have more from a medical point of view as well as from her own personal experience. But for me personally, once I started the Renew program, I actually did it with Teresa, which is really lovely, and she was great. But yeah, once I started the Renew program, I was really surprised at the decline in my fatigue. So I just feel a lot more energized after the classes. So I said before, like, I turned up to one of them in like my pajamas because I was so tired all day. And after I'd done the class, the next day I went for a walk, and then, I was doing more and more, and I really felt the difference with it. And it's definitely helped me to battle that fatigue. It helped battle the depression, and now I'm back to like running and doing the things that I like to do, and I'm not having to sleep during the day anymore, which gives me time to do all the things that I want to do. So yeah, I mean, movement just made such a difference to all the menopause side effects that I was having, definitely.
So lots of people will be put through a menopause when it comes to cancer treatment, and the menopause means the last period. And ordinarily we would say that you haven't been through the menopause until you haven't had a bleed for a year, unless we take your ovaries out because you had cancer or endometriosis. Well, then you go through menopause overnight. And lots of people will be put into a medical menopause because of the medications that they take, which might be ongoing, or due to the effects of chemotherapy. And we have receptors for estrogen from the hair on our head to the skin on our toes, which means that we can have symptoms from the loss of that estrogen all over the body. And the most famous one is hot flushes and sweats, but it impacts your physical health, joint pain, palpitations, headaches, dry skin, skin, breast changes, affects your mental health, depression, anxiety, difficulties with memory and concentration, insomnia, loss of libido. I can go on and on, and it all sounds rather frightening, but there are things that we can do at every stage. And medicine is medicine, and that's only one part of the puzzle. And actually, if you have an early menopause, which might be related to cancer, it might not be, there is no increased risk of having HRT until the age of 51, which is the average age of the menopause. And actually, if you go through an early menopause, you're more likely to have problems such as osteoporosis, where the bones become very thin and fragile and brittle. And so we really encourage people who go through an early menopause, if they can, and that means if they haven't had a hormone receptor positive cancer, and it's even more difficult when you've had a hormone receptor positive cancer. That means that you can't take HRT. And exercise is really important, whether or not you go through an early menopause, a natural, non-medical, non-surgical induced menopause. It helps with some of the symptoms of the menopause. It's known to help in particular with hot flushes and sweats. And you might say, well, I sweat when I exercise, why would this help? If you're somebody that doesn't exercise generally, then when you start, it might induce flushes and sweats, but actually in the long term, it really decreases the incidence of flushes and sweats. And at night, improves your sleep, improves your mood. Exercise is a treatment for mild to moderate depression anyway. But also, that resistance-based exercise plus what we would call weight-bearing exercise is what keeps your bones strong. Every single time that you put your foot on the floor, there is a jarring impact that goes ankles, knees, hips. And that the body sees that essentially as a micro-trauma, or as a really tiny little trauma to the bone. And the way that the bone responds to that is by laying down more bone. And that's what we want, because that's what helps with osteoporosis. So we want you to have a really good bone mass before you hit the menopause. But actually, that resistance-based weight-bearing exercise makes a difference onwards. So swimming is a marvelous cardiovascular activity, but it's not weight-bearing. And so we need to ensure that we are doing different kinds of exercise in order to get all the different benefits. And that even includes things like balance-based exercise. So something like Tai Chi or yoga, as you get older, your balance changes. So exercise during the menopause is hugely important and is definitely part of the puzzle. Sorry, I could go on about the menopause for a very long time.
Any more questions from the floor? Got shakes of the head. So we've got one question here of what are the guidelines on what we should do as cancer patients? 150 minutes of what? That is the question. So I think the general question is, you've got a certain amount of time that you're going to exercise a week, 2 hours, 2.5 hours. What should you be doing in that time? I'm keen for our renewing instructors to have a little.
I believe the guideline, it's a national guideline, it's 150 minutes of moderate intensity exercise. So as Tom was saying, exercise where you could be having a conversation where your heart rate's not too high, where your breathing's not too high that you can't have a conversation. So it's moderate intensity exercise. So it could be a light cycle, a walk, something along those lines. I believe that's what the guideline is at the moment.
Yeah, it's correct. It's aerobic, so at least 150 minutes a week of aerobic, which is cardiovascular types of exercise, as Sean was saying. So that could be cycling, it could be swimming. It's those repetitive type activities like that, rowing, brisk walking as well, and tends to be a bit of an emphasis on brisk rather than just normal pace walking, but that's not to say that that's not good. As we said, avoiding inactivity is the key, and just walking generally is very important. And these guidelines as well, it should be sort of highlighted that isn't although they're the national recommendations, it's not to say that that's appropriate for everyone. Someone might not be doing any exercise currently, so to go from 0 minutes to 150 minutes is too big a jump, possibly. For that person, it's maybe not appropriate. So going back to what we said earlier, building up in little bits. If you're not doing anything, to go to 5 minutes is a significant increase. Once you're used to doing 5 minutes a week and that's comfortable, can you do 10 minutes a week? And you're building up gradually towards that target. And that's a long-term target for someone who's not doing anything. But there's, going back to that study that I mentioned earlier, back in 2018, that roundtable study, I believe that they found that actually a lot of the outcomes, the positive outcomes that exercise can have, was found in doing 3 times 30 minutes of aerobic exercise a week, which is obviously far less than the 150 minutes. But again, that might be a target for some people to build up to.
And the guidance also recommends doing at least 2 resistance-based sessions a week. Now, that doesn't mean that you have to go and lift a barbell. That everything counts. So carrying your shopping from the car, your shopping is heavy, that counts. You know, a resistance band counts. These things don't have to be expensive, and they don't have to involve you leaving your house and going somewhere. And I think also when people hear 150 minutes, or they hear 3 times 30, they think, I don't have that. They don't have that time. Never mind what am I well enough to do, I don't have the time. It doesn't have to be like that. You can take it as exercise snacks, 10 minutes at a time. It all adds up.
Thank you. Teresa, anything to add?
She just pointed out what I was going to say. It was the 20 minutes of resistance exercise, and it's actually something that people find is especially important for women who have been put into early menopause, or because we're losing muscle mass. You lose your muscle mass every year, and lower muscle mass means you're just not going to have the strength to do a lot of the things you want to do. And if you're losing muscle mass at 25 or 30, where are you going to be when you're 75?
And what can you use for weights? Because, if you don't have the dumbbells at home.
So many things. I mean, if you did want to buy something, resistance bands come in so many different weights, and they're very cheap. But if you didn't want to buy anything and just start with things in your house, you've got tin cans, water bottles, jugs of washing up liquid, chairs, luggage. I mean, I've trained someone with a Hoover. They used the Hoover one time as a weight because they were actually a really strong person. And I'm like, okay, well, how about the Hoover? Let's lift that. There's anything you can find, but a rucksack with a few books inside. There's a lot of choices.
Sorry, Teresa, I didn't mean to cut you there. And the other thing is just using body weight.
Yeah, exactly.
That in itself is a weight. So doing squats, lunges. You maybe saw from Teresa's workout earlier, doing a lunge because it's not a squat with using both legs evenly, then it's slightly more demanding possibly than just doing a squat. So there's a whole different host of things that you can do, and for some people actually going through who are going through cancer treatment, exercising at home may be more appropriate for some people, especially if they've got a compromised immune system. Chemotherapy is cytotoxic. It kills fast-dividing cells, which includes cancer cells, but it also includes immune cells. So people are more at risk of infection, and actually going on the bus or public transport to go to an exercise session might not be the most appropriate thing to do, even though you're getting the benefits from the exercise there. Could you maybe actually do exercise at home and reduce that risk of infection? Avoid going to the gym where you might be sharing equipment. You could do things at home, and that would be completely appropriate, and maybe more so for people who have that compromised position.
Yeah, so it can be done at home, and that's just as valid. It still counts as exercise. It is 9:00. It comes to the end of our session. We've had a very wide-ranging discussion with our wonderful panelists. I'm trying to think of some of the key take-home messages. Obviously talk to your doctors, make sure it comes with their approval and they're on board. But we're thinking about moderate exercise. We're thinking about starting small. That doesn't, that's not where you're going to end up in a few months' time. You start where you can. We've got ideas about motivation, but that only gets you so far. You need to be disciplined. You need to be able to get out of the door, even when you're not feeling up to it. And then, you've got to listen to your body as well. There are going to be times when you can exercise or you can move and it doesn't feel like the right thing to do, but it's really important to listen to that. But overall, for probably the vast majority, and this is what the research is showing, physical activity, movement really boosts outcomes. And it's paradoxically, one of the more difficult things to do. It's the last thing you think about doing, but it is one of the most important. That's the best I can do in summing this up. I want to say a big, big thank you to Sean, Teresa, Tom, Liz, Philippa, and everyone who joined us here, both in Samsung HQ and online. And I shall pass it over to Jemima to wrap things up. Oh, technology even here. You're muted.
Oh, there we go.
Hey, there we go.
Thank you so much to the panel. And I just want to fly the flag for Philippa and the menopause there. Thank you so much for that. It's such an important point to be able to tell people about that and how important it is for them and all the people who are living with cancer and how exercise can really help them. Tom, I love the fact that inactivity is not the way forward, and anything you can do to keep your body moving is so important. Luke, you've done an amazing job hosting. Thank you so much. Thank you for sharing your passion. Thank you for hosting so brilliantly. And we're just so grateful to all of you for taking the time to come and join us this evening. As Luke said, Renew, our 8-week exercise program, isn't the only way that we keep you moving. We have things like come and try out paddleboarding, come bowling, going for walks with other people, because what is more important than meeting other people who get it and getting active together? So that community is at the heart of everything we do, including our exercise program. We have some other events coming up. We've got our post-treatment coaching program kicking off the end of September. We've got a couple more places. That's a 6-week with Life After Cancer. We've got the menopause program with the wonderful Dr. Philippa Kay and Anise Mukherjee and everyone else that's kicking off in October. We have a new yoga program starting in January. And of course, we have our Renew program, which is open to anyone during treatment and post-treatment living with incurable yet treatable cancer, palliative, right up and down the cancer pathway. So I just want to say a huge thank you for joining us for this National Fitness Day, talking about how we can keep our body moving despite cancer and help our mind, body, and the risk of recurrence of some types of cancer. So without further ado, good night, everybody, and thank you so much.
All right, thank you, everyone.